Hello, I'm Punar Givanch, and welcome to What's Wrong with the Podcast. Today, we're very excited to be speaking with Adio Dinika. Adio is a research fellow at the Distributed AI Research Institute, where he focuses on the intersection of AI, labor, and ethics. His research highlights the contributions of data workers in the Global South, particularly in Sub-Saharan Africa, and advocates for inclusive AI development guided by social justice and decolonial perspectives. Enjoy listening.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. Today, we have the great pleasure of speaking with Adio Dinika. He's a researcher at Distributed AI Research Institute. Hi, Adio. How are you?
Hi, Pina. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. We feel very lucky to have you here today. Please tell us more about yourself.
Where do I start? So, okay,
Take
you've
us
already
back.
said my name, so I don't need to start with that. And thank you for pronouncing it correctly. Usually I get very interesting pronunciations. Not that I mind, of course. So yeah, I am a researcher at the Distributed AI Research Institute, and my focus there is primarily going behind the scenes of in the AI supply chain, so the labor that is involved in AI. That is precisely what I do.
So it's already, I feel like what you do will take us to a very juicy part of the conversation already. So, in what you do, what are some of the things that you're seeing that we should know about?
Right. So I will try to keep this I would say bright, but however yeah, I'm afraid it's not exactly very bright what I see. So pretty much what I see is I don't know if you've heard about the workers in Kenya who were working for ChatGPT and for Facebook who were paid less than $2 an hour. So this obviously is terrible. Less than $2 an hour is terrible pay for anyone in any part of the world. Now, when I traveled to Kenya, I found out that whatever I thought I understood about this subject, the reality on the ground is much, much worse. So I think what people generally need to understand is that in as much as the AI hypees talk about AI being this amazing, amazing thing, and we all think of it as machines, as robots, there are people behind the scenes, and these people are not being treated well.
And why, and by the way, thanks for the consideration to keeping it bright, but obviously we're sour. Our motto is to stop sugarcoating, so thanks for keeping it real as well. So when you explaining the situation, what is the work that they're doing? Why do we need this, I guess, secret, almost human workforce behind the scenes?
Oh, wonderful question. And yes, I love that the name is sour, so I don't have to sugarcoat anything here. Wonderful. So I think the long and short of it is that for any AI system to work, it needs data, and it needs copious amounts of data. So they're the people who create the data, and they're the people who label, annotate, and clean the data, and then they are content moderators. So as I said in a presentation I gave last week, actually, I said that we have two situations happening. The first one is that machines are dumb. Yeah, machines are stupid. And the second one is that people are sick. And by sick, I don't mean with COVID or with malaria or flu. I mean in the head. And I don't mean this in the mental illness part of sick, but I mean in the unhinged, out of control way. So therefore, when we have this situation on our hands, where we have machines which are not smart and human beings which are off the hinges, already we have a problem there. What do I mean by this? I mean, so machines need to learn everything that they know. Well, when we say a machine can recognize someone's face, a machine can be able to tell A, B, C, D. Someone has to train that machine to be able to recognize that. Alone, it cannot tell that. So we need these people, therefore, behind the scenes who are busy feeding these copious amounts of data into these machines. So labeling a car, like, making these small circles. I think you have done capture at some point, Yeah.
Millions of times. I didn't realize I was doing free labor until like last
Oh,
year.
yeah. Yes, you were. You definitely were. So there are people now whose job is to do something like that. So clicking away, making clicking pieces of stairs, labeling to say, okay, this is, let's say, picture a road or a room like where you are now. I see, is it a coffee maker behind the scenes? So someone has to label this and say coffee maker for the machine to be able to know this is a coffee maker. So that's the first category of workers, broadly speaking. Of course, it is more nuanced than this, but maybe keeping it at this level, I would say these people have to teach computers how to recognize anything. And then the second group is that when people post stuff on the internet, there are a lot of people who have issues out there, right? Who post the most disgusting, the most vile content you can ever think of. And before we see this content, most of the times we don't see this content on our Twitter, sorry, it's called X now, but yeah, that. On our Instagram, on our Facebook, we don't see this violent content, but there are people chopping off people's heads and posting this online. There are people abusing children and posting these pictures online. And think of the worst thing that you can think of human beings doing. And unfortunately, human beings' capacity for evil and terrible stuff is unmatched. So when they post all of this, there is a team of people who have to first look at it so that you and I don't have to. And these are the people that I'm talking about who are working in, sadly, these people are located in the so-called global south, or global majority, as I prefer to call it. So these people have to work in these mundane, routine tasks, labeling stuff for the machines to learn. And I met some guy who told me that, oh, you're from Germany, do you know the city of Hamburg? This was in Kenya, Nairobi. And I said, of course I know Hamburg. He was like, well, I know Hamburg more than you do. And I'm like, have you ever been? He's like, no, but I worked on a project where I was annotating data for a car manufacturing company in Germany, and we were labeling the streets of Hamburg, so I know them more than you do. So we have people like these, and these people. So without these people, these machines, these systems, these AI systems cannot work. So we need them to train this data. And then when people post the stuff they post, racist stuff, hurtful stuff. So when they post this stuff online, there are people who are these content moderators who are literally, I would say, janitors in this system who have to clean the stuff so we don't have to see it. So are they being treated well? Is their mental health being taken care of? Because imagine the stuff that you get to see. Like I said, think of the worst that you can ever imagine and then multiply it by 10. Someone somewhere is posting that stuff online. And then someone has to scrape it off the internet before you and I see it. So that person who's seeing this stuff, imagine if this is your job, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, seeing this stuff. Let's talk about your mental health. And then also, how much are you being paid? Like, what's your salary when you work in this kind of job?
This is so, I mean, it's insane to me how invisible this is, right? Like when you go and you're based in Germany, I'm based in US. When we go to conferences, and hear like see a tech event or whatever, there's so much hype about AI. So there's either that camp, right? Everybody's like so enthusiastic, which like I get it. I identify as an AI optimist. I feel like it can really save us time and energy to actually do more critical thinking, to address maybe some of the problems of the world if it like takes away some of the tedious work from us as a tool, not as a brain. But at the same time, what I also see is any conversation around ethics, responsibility is typically in a different camp, right? Like these conversations don't coexist usually in spaces, even at conferences. And they very much happen in silos. But even in those conversations, we use so many big words like responsibility, public interest, ethics, what does that even mean, right? And we're trying to like understand what that means in AI context while we have this very real, tangible, in action problem taking place, which the consequences of we can't even foresee, right? Like, what does that, like a generation of people in a country doing such mentally disturbing work, what does that do to a society, to a community? What does that do to the countries like society? Like, what are the unintended consequences of that job existence, period, right? Like we literally have a position to mentally disturb ourselves, right? And in high risk jobs, there are always high risk jobs on the planet. You either get paid very well, you have an incredible like insurance or healthcare support, you will have mental care support, right? Without any of that cushion or safety net, you're just like doing that for the sake of money, and people might be in that much of need of, to be able to make that money, which, might already mean some intersectionalities of this like population too. Like if there is that much urgency of making that money that you need to go through all of this stuff, where are you at your life anyway, right? Like if we remove the numbers from the conversation and think of each individual with their like human stories, what must they have been like gone through or are going through to be able to have that urgency to like make that money? And on top of whatever they're going through, they're experiencing this, right? What are the consequences of that? We don't even know, but maybe you see through your work. So I wanted to kind of like get your thoughts on the societal implications in the global south of like from this taking place.
As you were speaking, I just thought of something very interesting or fascinating to me, at least, is how when AI burst on the scene, we had these bright ideas on how AI would take over the mundane tasks, the hard stuff, let's say, and it will leave us time to devote ourselves to more nicer things like making art and literature, and music. But now what do we have? We have the people who are doing this hard, back-breaking and mentally taxing work, and then we have AI systems producing art and music, and essentially putting out, like stealing the work of artists. And now we have people. I have to make this clear, of course, I am anti any form of AI art generation, or because essentially what it does is it's stealing people's work and then mashing it up and saying, yeah, here's an AI art piece. But I'm just saying, thinking of how now is AI making the art and it's people doing the hard work. And I wonder
all
if
working for AI already. We're
exactly.
like,
I wonder if if the AI takeover we saw in Terminator, if it has already happened, where machines have already taken over.
yeah, we don't
But
have to go into like the sentient like speculative future, like it's already
yeah,
happening.
exactly. But I think I'm coming back to the issue that you raised on the unintended consequences. I think it's like I said that when I went to Nairobi, what I saw in Nairobi was worse than what I thought I understood. And mind you, I am from Zimbabwe originally. So I would like to say, and I've done my research in a couple of countries in Africa. So I would like to say I kind of understand Africa. And as I like to say in many spaces, I say I'm the only person who's allowed to say Africa and referring to it as if it's a country because I'm from there. If anyone else does, I'll scream racism. But however, what I mean is when I went there, because I understand the situation of my people, because I've grown up there, what I saw there was really something that I cannot, really put words to, because I spoke to people, young people in their 20s, whose marriages had broken down because of their work in the AI supply chain. I spoke to people who said that their wives had left them because they were no longer sexually active in their 20s, because the stuff they had seen was simply beyond horrific that whenever it came time for them to perform their conjugal duties at home, they simply could not. So now imagine, what does that mean for a young man in his 20s saying that I cannot sustain an erection, not because I have been taking bad drugs or I'm overweight or anything, but it's because as a consequence of my work. And then this person tells you that, yeah, and then at the end of this, I was fired, and just like that. And not fired because they did a bad job, but fired because, well, the company was done, you know? So too bad. Find the next thing. So when you talk of people who are seeing stuff like this, I've spoken to people who were refugees running away from the war in Tigray. And these are people who are already victims of bad politics in Ethiopia, where the government was going after a particular ethnic group, right? I don't want to get into the politics of that, but now these are people who are running away from such a situation. And then because they speak a particular language, which is needed in training or in content moderation, they are hired. And what do they have to see? The content that is about the war that is happening at the home where they've essentially run away from. And what then happened to these people? So I've spoken to people who have become drug addicts, people who have become alcoholics. Imagine. So in a body of work which we'll be launching on the 20th of June about this project, about this particular project that I'm talking about, you see some of the stuff that I can already give sort of a highlight on is a report about people who have fallen into substance abuse. And I'm talking of Christians. If you know anything about African Christians, Pentecostal Christians, these are your most devout people who will cast and bind you and try to exercise you if they see you holding a bottle of alcohol, right? And now imagine someone like that now being a drunkard, literally someone who has to survive on alcohol because of the stuff they had seen. There was no other way for them to cope except to try and get into alcohol, into weed, into, I don't know, the other bunch of drugs that they were taking. So now imagine what then happens to a society when we have people who are the young, the bright. And going earlier to what you said about that when we go to conferences, these things are often said in these lofty, fancy ways, or not even said at all. The thing is, these large tech companies actually prefer it that way, that these workers remain invisible, remain behind the scenes, because when they are behind the scenes, it makes it easy to classify their work as low intellect. So these are jobs which don't demand high intellect, therefore they can be paid anyhow. And if we don't know about what's happening, then who cares? I mean, if we don't know what's happening, right? So it's deliberate. But now we have this whole, and these people, mind you, again, like I said, as you see in when we eventually get to launch like the work that we've been doing for the last couple of months, these people, these workers I'm talking about, are not uneducated. These are people with master's degrees. But sadly, where job opportunities are simply scarce. So they need a job. And now we have companies which are well aware that there are people in different parts of the world, refugees, for example, in different parts of the world, who already have this precarious, paperwork. So they will take any job as long as it has some money. And how much is this money? So imagine someone going through 10,000 pictures, labeling those. They are paid something like $140 for going through 10,000 pictures, labeling 10,000 pictures. So something like 0.014 cents euros, which is less than 14 cents per picture. And this is an obscene amount of time. And, so this is just, like I would say, it's, like I said already, it's terrible what's going on. And one other thing that I actually found out is, so these workers have contracts, right? Okay, yeah, contracts, good. How long are these contracts? No one gets a contract more than 6 months. And when that contract expires, you are not told that, hey, we're renewing it. We are told, go home, we'll call you. So essentially it means you have no job security whatsoever, and you have no idea what's going to happen after that contract, whether you're going to be called or not. You don't call us, we call you. And the other contracts are actually, the craziest I've seen was 4 days long, a 4-day contract. And these are contracts I've seen with my own eyes. So this is not stuff that I'm, making up always. Because definitely when the person told me, I was like, my friend, I'm sorry. It's not that I don't believe you, but
Yeah.
4 days contract, can I see it? And I've seen it. And also one funny thing that happens is, so because these outsourcing companies that I'm talking about who hire these people in these different parts of the world, they have clients. So when a client says, hey, I need my work done by this time, instead of hiring more people to be able to do this work, they simply go to the workers they have already and say, guys, the client demands their work done by this day. So what does that mean? It means some days, instead of working 8 hours, as provide the contract, you have to work 11 hours, because if we disappoint the client, we'll end your job. So you work 11 hours. How many hours are you paid for? 8, because that's also your contract. These 11 are just to make sure we don't lose the client. So technically, out of you work 11 hours and 8 are paid. The rest, thank you for your service.
This is like I can't even comprehend how this is just treated as like a just regular freelance contract work. Like you do hourly work as if it's like, just I'm gonna go in and write some stuff or illustrate, right? Like there's a huge freelance gig economy happening. Not when it comes to you know, such high stress demanding positions, right? Like this is not the first job in the world that deals with such incredible, difficult situations, right? You can be working at a court,
Definitely.
you can be a security guard, you can be, a psychotherapist, you can be, a trauma surgeon, whatever that is, right? But the thing is, all those professions that need to deal with such difficult circumstances are like have kind of like a support network, right? If not unions, right? Like they are like represented, they have a voice, they're seen, they're not invisible. They are supported through, healthcare, mental support, and and they're like highly regarded positions as well, right? What's so like interesting and not in a way where like how is this even like happening in a world that now we have so much more information share, right? Like if this were happening, and it probably was happening already in like any AI work like years ago, how we gonna know about it, right? Anyway, right? If the big publications don't write about it, how are we gonna know unless we like travel or if we're out in the field? And the vice and virtues of another big thing of our like ruler of our lives, social media, right? Like it basically is a great analogous example in a way that what it did to an entire generation, right? Like there's this incredible statistics on showing that with the iPhone launch, what's happening with suicide rates within youth. And this is because, when I was in college, I had Facebook, right? But it wasn't in my pocket. And therefore, the amount of interaction I had with it was like way less. And now, like, we live on it. And what does that do to mental health? And there are growing numbers of studies around it. And it seems, it seems like we're now pushing away the problem even further. Like this started to become a visible problem in countries that, can be loud about it. And now we're like, so if this were to happen in a population, why not we hide it and push it in environments where we can like kind of mute, right? And it's such a, and I often say like, we could learn from what happened to the society or a generation or our mental health through like social media and maybe take those learnings into what's happening with AI. It seems like we did take some of those learnings, we just shifted the context of the problem, which is very disturbing to hear. And it's also very interesting that going back to some of the virtues and what social media enabled, like the transparency, the connectivity we have, being much more aware in what's happening in the world, right? Like In the past, if we were to hear a scenario about a war happening, we would probably just have one news channel telling us why that war is happening. Now we see everything in like sheer evidence of what's going on, right? With all the wars in the world. And yet this conversation, we don't necessarily have transparency in this or information around it or aware, and therefore, as like a greater society, like what is our responsibility in this, right? Like we're just excited consumers about it because many of us are unaware, like either like we don't understand the back end of the work, and even if we understand, we don't think to that extent because you can't really know unless you're like talking to these people and hearing these stories. You can't, even like you're in this field, you're a researcher and you're saying, I understood when I went there, right? So it's, and technically like social media can be that platform that take us there and like raise awareness. But it's almost like in this area, it's mute, right? Again, going back to choosing what content we consume or don't consume. And what I would love to get your thoughts on, as this probably will become a growing conversation, right? There will be many more organizations like yourselves who will do this very meaningful work to advocate for people who are not only like marginalized, but also harmed, right? There will be, if not already, and I don't know, and you might know better about this, propositions that AI could get to the level where AI is doing its own self-check, right? Or training. And this is even more disturbing to me because like I actually saw kind of like a very, very small case study of this, and I was in South by Southwest in March, and there was this company presenting their like all the co-pilots that they're launching and how hyped they are about that and their own custom GPTs and things like that. And they were literally presenting a GPT that was checking in on bias on their projects on their website, and another GPT checking that GPT if that was, if that had bias or not. I'm like, well, what are they trained on? Aren't they trained on the same thing? Like, who is checking who? Like, why did we? And my question there was like, why are we removing humans from that work? And now, hearing what I'm hearing from you, I feel like something like this will come up as a proposition to protect people. And I don't even know what the consequences of that would be. And I would love to get your thoughts on that.
Very, very, very interesting. As you were talking about this, that these GPTs, which check the bias, blah, 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 blah. And I find it funny, but in a not so funny way, when people place this much hope on these tools and their ability to check for bias, because evidence is present that these tools cannot check for bias. Because I think the problem that we have mainly is that people want to present AI as some form of magic pill or as performing some form of magic trick, which it does not do. So whatever AI tool that you pick, usually it mirrors society. And society, as we know it, is biased. Everyone, you, me, we are biased. And therefore, we need another human being to sometimes check our biases and also ourselves to self-reflect. But like I said in my earlier statement, that machines are not smart, machines are dumb, right? So therefore, when we then claim that a machine, which is essentially daft, can be able to check another machine, I think we are overplaying the functionality of AI here. Because when I speak of this, what I mean by this issue of bias is that machines represent the bias that we have. I don't know if you know about Amazon's recruiting tool that they had to discontinue. Because what was it doing? It was hiring only men and discriminating against women. Why was that case? Because society is extremely misogynistic, and that's the fact of the matter. So the AI simply mirrored what we have, and we've seen this in countless times. There are cases in the last couple of months in the US where Black people have been arrested after facial recognition software placed them at the scenes of crimes. There is an 8-month pregnant woman who was arrested because some guy had been hijacked by a woman, and facial recognition placed her as the identified her as the perpetrator. This lady was 8 months pregnant. So which brings me to my point that what you realize that AI always needs a human babysitter. Or I don't know if we should call it machine sitter. I don't know. But we always need, a human somewhere, because what if there was a human being, for example, when this facial recognition software I identified this lady, a human being would have said, "Sir, was the woman you slept with and then robbed you, was she 8 months pregnant? 8 months pregnant?" And the guy would have said no, and that lady would not even have been arrested at all. But this lady took about 11 hours inside police cells to get, checked and all this. So you realize that AI is actually probably creating more problems than it is solving. But of course, I am not a Luddite. I'm not saying let's throw our shoes into the machines. No, I love AI as the next person, but I just like us to be more realistic as to the issues of AI. So I don't know if you're also familiar with this, that there were certain fraud detection and like anti-burglary detection AI tools which were helping supermarkets to detect thieves in the supermarket. Then they would alert the manager, and then the manager would see the person who's stealing grapes or whatever stuff. And then what came out was that actually they were teams of people in Bangladesh, in India, in the Philippines, who were physically observing customers in the shop. And then if they see someone who is acting suspicious or who's stealing something, they send a text the manager in the shop to say, "Hey, check the guy in the green jacket." But this was sold as AI. There are studies to this. You could look this up, where it has emerged that many companies claiming to have AI solutions are simply recruiting armies of people in the global south who are watching in real time and making comments,
So this is like basically the greenwashing of technology, right? This is AI washing happening.
Precisely, exactly. It's happening.
Yeah.
So, when people therefore are telling me about these wonderful things that AI is coming to do this, like I said, I am not saying AI is useless. No, no, no. I appreciate the different functionalities that AI can do for us. There are things that it helps us. Now, this conversation can be easily transcribed, and this is good, right? Scheduling of meetings, these are things that different tools, this and AI tools, whatever, are helping us with. So I appreciate the uses, but let's be realistic about the functions that it can do, because honestly, when we are saying this machine can solve these problems and not acknowledging the bias that is already inherent in us as human beings, because first we have to check our own biases. Check our own prejudices before we start talking about AI being, this. Like I've heard people saying AI will be sentient in a few years. It's always 5 years, by the way. Yeah, that's always the number. AI is always 5 years from being sentient. And I'm like, if you are hiring armies of people in Bangladesh
they
to
will be
follow
very
customers,
sentient. They will be very sentient.
So
it's just like we don't even understand humans, and we think we understand artificial intelligence, like our own.
imagine. So
There is no elimination of bias, right? We can only manage bias. So let's talk about methods of managing bias versus like tools checking tools. And I think I had an
exactly.
incredible conversation with another friend who will also be a live podcast soon. I'll definitely share. He talks about like the naming of the technology is the problem, right? When we say artificial intelligence, we get fascinated by it. It's like magic. If we had called it like probabilistic algorithms, nobody would have found it sexy.
Well, that would have been accurate, but definitely ain't no one jumping up
No,
and down for
it wouldn't gone
probabilistic
math.
algorithm. Yeah,
Oh my God.
I've seen conversations on Twitter. Twitter is usually one of the most lovely places to really understand how little people understand about,
Yes.
well, any random subject, but AI specifically, because you hear people saying, yeah, AI learns the same way human beings learn. And I'm like, so perhaps you need to understand how humans learn. I think before we start talking about this, maybe let's take you back, So
I
So
love
we
that
have
we're getting into pedagogy. Like, oh yeah, like I'm an expert.
yeah, because honestly, and then that probabilistic algorithm is exactly what it does. So this is exactly what these large language models, for example, like
Yeah.
ChatGPT, it's fascinating when I see people who are new to these things talking about how fascinating ChatGPT is. And I'm like, if you actually, when you are done with the fascination of it churning out, an essay in a few minutes, have you then sat down to say, let's read this essay? Let's really, check for quality and really say, okay, where are we going here? Because if you are a serious person, right? If you use ChatGPT to generate any content for yourself, if you're a serious, self-respecting person, you will be like, ain't no way I'm letting this stuff go and pose as my work. At least
Yeah.
this is my my view on I've used ChatGPT, and when I've used it to generate content, I've read that content, and I'm like, I'm not sure I want my name with this stuff. So of course it has uses. You can use it, of course, to help you with simple things like what
Exactly.
helping you with grammar check. Yeah, that. But content generation. So now when we speak about these things being intelligent, when it cannot tell the difference between propaganda and real stuff, when it cannot
Yeah.
tell the difference between bias and non-bias, because it needs someone has to train it to recognize that this particular word is an insult. But as a human being, sometimes even if I don't understand the language, I'll be like, I don't speak Turkish, but that word you said there was insult. The way you said it to me, the way you verbalized it, your facial expressions, I know you insulted me. And now a machine cannot tell that. So people
Yeah.
would want to tell us that no, these machines are smart now. They can look at your face. I'm sorry, but I always say rubbish. Whenever I hear people saying, oh, there's this AI tool we use for interviews. So it reads your facial expressions and then helps you in choosing a candidate. And I'm like, rubbish. No machine is going to be able to tell from my face, and especially this dark face, and in this poor lighting, what machine is going to tell me what is going on in my head?
Also, what does the machine know about you to interpret all your facial expressions? Like, what a
And because
generalizing, dehumanizing comment that is. Like, it's,
exactly, because human beings are so complex. We are a collection of little stories, little experiences built over years. And it's the same way when, for example, if you learn my language, Shona or Ontebele, if you learn it, still there's, as long as you're not native or you don't live in the
yeah,
area, there's still some little cultural nuances you will miss even if
yeah,
you're fluent, you know.
yeah.
So now, if human beings, as smart as they can be, I don't want to say as we are, because I've also seen
You've seen
evidence
some
to the
stuff. Yeah.
contrary. But as smart, intelligent as we are, if we still can miss some nuances, even in a language where we speak fluently, because there's some cultural connotation around it.
Yeah.
What about a machine? How do you honestly stand in front of people and tell them that a machine can replace a human being? Yeah, maybe someone with an IQ, the level of room temperature, maybe a machine can. But do we have people like that? No.
Yeah. Oh my God. I think we can talk all day, Adia. Seriously. Like, I feel like this should be, or this should be a talk show. Like we should be talking about this on an ongoing basis until everybody hears it.
Definitely.
But I do want to be mindful of your time. So I'm gonna ask one more question before asking for your advice. Um, at the pace of everything happening today, right? The exponential growth
Mhm.
of AI. Obviously, the work that organizations like Distributed AI Research Institute is doing is so, so crucial. The biggest question and the thing that also like puzzles me a little bit is like, how do we like what is the urgency on what you work on, right? Because everything is almost feeling urgent. Like we need to be way more prepared and like think of means of mitigation almost, because there's no planning because it's such a complex, chaotic future. We can't
Mhm.
plan. It's like, it's like analogy to art of war to me. but we're not even preparing. Like definitely
Mhm,
a lot of
mhm,
people in tech are not preparing. They're just hyped on the next thing that is going to come out, right?
mhm, mhm, mhm.
So what is some of like the urgent work that Distributed AI Research Institute is doing, and what else that needs to be done by your organization or other similar organizations? And how does that scale or speed up almost to be able to match the kind of, or like, discrepancy of like what's happening today? Like the new stuff is like coming out every day. Like it's like do harm, learn, and do it, right? That's the current ethos. And how do we catch up? That's like always that like puzzles me, and I would love to get your thoughts.
Mhm. So of course, that is a very, I would say, complicated question, because it is not clear cut what needs to be done or what should be done. But I would say, speaking, of course, from our organization, DAIR, we are focused on combating harms of tech harms, broadly speaking, and also minimizing and mitigating the bias, because we believe that not every tool that can be made should be made. Yeah. It's
Yes.
as simple as that. Just
Yeah.
because you can make it does not mean you should make it.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
I
this
feel
is
like
a
that goes to a
core.
lot of products in the world. Yes.
Oh yes, definitely. So this is a core thing that we believe at DARE, that when it comes to tech products, we need to be clear on that. So one of the things, of course, we need to talk about is dealing with the labor side of things. We need to, as a matter of urgency, prioritize the well-being of the workers, these data workers, the well-being of these data workers in this supply chain of AI. But this can also extend to beyond AI, but just the people who make this possible. Because we have companies who are making billions of dollars in profits. And when you speak to the workers that I'm talking about, the data workers in different parts of the world, they are not asking for a lot. You realize this when you talk to these people, and you realize these people are not asking for a lot. Of course, if you were to hire me, I would definitely, ask for quite a bit. But the workers I'm talking about here are people who are not asking for crazy, and they're not making crazy demands. These are people who are asking for a living wage, something that can afford them a decent life. These are people who are asking for simple mental health care, having actual counselors who understand the work they do, who talk them through the stuff they see. They are asking for contracts to just be safe that I work at this company, and not have this situation where I only know that I have a job for 4 days. Beyond 4 days, nobody knows what's going to happen. These are people who are asking to be treated like humans, to have their issues understood, to be listened to. Those are the basic things that these workers are asking for. None of them are asking to be paid the same as those executives in Silicon Valley. These are not people asking for four-figure salaries, So this is one of the things that I think we need to urgently work on, to make sure that we give these workers a decent work-life balance. Working hours, let's not ask them to work 11 hours a day. That is simply inhuman. Let's have them work normal working hours and pay them living wages. And we know what living wages are in different parts of the world. So just because they are living in Kenya, it does not mean that therefore we can simply give them $2, because guess what? Yeah, the other people who are unemployed. No, but is $2 enough to have someone live a comfortable life? So then the other thing that I would also raise, I think, is combating bias, not just with workers, but in the production of these things, to be cognizant, to be aware of these inherent biases that each and every one of us has. So at DARE, we are actually trying to highlight these areas in different facets, because we have different researchers working on different projects. And one of the things we're trying to highlight is where the bias is found and dealing with that particular bias. So, for example, there are issues to do with the zoning systems in cities, how cities, the architecture of those cities, there is bias embedded into that. The education that we have, So if we can be able to deal with this bias from that level, then we can then be able to start speaking of AI being good for us in the future. But unless and until we deal with the misogyny, we deal with the racism, which is inherent in our communities, then we cannot in any way hope to build any AI tools that are free of bias. So I think these are some of the things that I think we need to be thinking about. And also, of course, we need to talk about these things. As you said earlier, that most of this stuff, we don't know about it. And I think that's one thing I think we are doing, I would say, quite well, even though I'm tooting our own horn. But I think we are doing well to try and let the world know, to expose this situation. My hope, as I said in a different presentation, is perhaps if the same way, when we have different products where we say this product, even movies, we see saying no animal was harmed in the production of this movie, or food products which have some certification that they were produced harm-free. We have heard of blood diamonds, where certain diamonds from certain countries are banned because they are blood diamonds. So I think, of course, I know I'm being very hopeful here, but if we could also have similar standards in AI, where we know that this AI product that we are using at our workplace, in our office, was made from fair labor practices, and no people were harmed in the production of this AI tool. No data was stolen to make this AI tool we're using at our company. So if we could have such a certification, I think we could move closer towards getting to a good AI future, so to say.
I mean, that shouldn't be that far-fetched if animal rights activists achieve that, right? Like, we're basically talking about, protecting humans here. And if we want to really create a tool that will help humans and things, we should also be mindful of the making of that tool. And I think in sharing that, you did give a bit of an advice as well, but anything else you would like to tell anybody who is like getting into the field or is in the field already or is working with AI in some capacity?
So mainly, of course, the first thing that I say is get educated. And I cannot stress this enough.
Yeah.
Get educated. It's very funny how when we speak of AI, generally speaking, and then when you really ask, but what is AI? You'll be surprised at what you hear. And I feel like many of the conversations we're engaging in, which is what I think makes the tech bros get away with murder, is because we don't even understand what AI is. So when we speak of it as this magic product, we then do not, so because once you don't understand that there is data labeling, machine learning, etc., going on for you to get this AI product. There is this process going on. There are content moderators, annotators, labelers who are working for us to get there. And therefore, already, if you don't know this, you just think, oh, wow, ChatGPT, awesome. If you think, oh, wow, whatever, Stable Diffusion, generates this lovely picture. Oh, that's my avatar. Looks lovely. If we don't understand the process of how these things are made, then already we cannot engage in a conversation of making this process, these products fair or equitable. So that's one very key thing. Let's get educated. The second thing is, I think we need to be bold and not just take what tech bros say lying down. There was a time when there was this whole, let's pause, AI is going to kill us all, let's pause for 6 months, and people were running around losing their ish over this, and I was like, yeah, but is this not just some marketing gimmick by the tech bros?
Exactly.
Like, oh yeah,
please regulate us, and then in the back end,
Exactly, and also taking up space. I think we need to take more space, because when we hear of these tech bros, these big companies getting involved in policymakers, to be honest, that for me sounds like hiring a robber as a consultant to set up your security at your house. The robber who is known to be stealing from your community, you hire them to be, the consultant tell you how to set up your security. Of course, they will leave loopholes there to allow them to, do what they do. So this is how I see when I see these huge tech companies being involved in policy making. I hear in the US recently, I was reading today, just a headline which was flashing, how Sam Altman, OpenAI, is being consulted in some some policing tools that need to be developed in the US. I just saw this fleeting headline, but things like this happening, that OpenAI is being consulted to help with policing, and I'm like, yeah, but yeah, this is after making money, So perhaps let's have people who are not after making money.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's what I think, and I think so. I mean, of course, I can't overemphasize that we need to look at so of course, getting capacitated, not just learning and knowing what happens, but also getting the actual skills. Because if we have more people who have the actual skills of making these AI tools and systems, then we can also look towards creating AI tools, AI products that are actually fair. So for example, at DAIR, we are not only about pointing out the harms, also, or not just working theoretically, but we're also trying to also work practically to say, okay, here's the problem. What can we do about it? So one of my colleagues at DAIR is developing a translation tool that focuses on Tigrinya in Amharic, language spoken in Ethiopia, which, according to independent reviewers, is actually better than Google's Google Translate. So if we then therefore get more people who are involved in natural language processing, more people getting involved in machine learning, more people getting involved in the whole AI supply chain, then we can be able to develop our own tools. Because if we let even in music, we've had indie musicians, in books, we've had indie publishers. Because if we let the big tech control everything, then of course they will not make tools that are equitable, they'll make tools that are profitable. So if we then, as the general people, can get the skills and be able to program, be able to code, be able to make these and annotate our own data. So Lesanfre, the one I'm just talking about, they collect their own data. So they don't go on the website and steal people's data, which some companies that I know of did.
Yeah, but it's on the news. You can Google it.
Yes, exactly, precisely. So that's what I think. If we can do this and move beyond just criticizing, but also making the tools that we want. So again, of course, a little bit of self-promotion here. We have a series at DAIR on our website, you'll find it, which is called Possible Futures series, where we are trying to imagine what do possible futures look like. So give it a read. We'll be happy to get feedback on that and see how together we can shape this equitable AI future.
Adio, this was one of the best and most real conversations I had on AI. Thank you so, so much for making time for us. I encourage everybody listening to follow DAIR's work and also look into the project that they're launching on June 20th. And we very much need all the work that you're doing, are grateful for the work that you're doing, and look forward to following all your future work. Thank you.
Oh, thanks to you for having me. It was really a pleasure talking to you.
And that is this week's episode of What's Wrong with the Podcast. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcasting platform. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Links can be found in the episode description, and you can also find them on our website, podcast.what'swrongwith.xyz. If you found value in the show, we would appreciate if you could rate us and leave a review, or you can simply tell your friends about us. For more details on our guests, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Don't forget to join us next week. Thank you for listening.